The Entrepreneur's Library, episode 117.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Library, the only book-centric podcast that reviews all the top-selling business books and shares authors' perspective firsthand. This is your resource to finding the next great book that will enable you to grow personally and professionally. Welcome your host, Wade Danielson.
Thank you for joining us on the EL. Today we have Chris Kerns, author of Trendology. I'm really excited for whether you're with a small business or with a large enterprise for you to listen to this interview, because Chris does a great job of breaking down something that we haven't covered yet, really, which is data-driven real-time marketing through his book, Trendology. And again, if you want an opportunity to actually win this book, become a VIP at the elpodcast.com, and let's jump into the interview. Welcome, Chris, and thank you for joining us on the Entrepreneur's Library.
Hey, Wade, thanks so much for having me.
Will you take just a moment before we dive into your book to introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit about you personally?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Chris Kerns. I am the Director of Analytics and Research at Spreadfast in Austin, Texas, and we are a social marketing platform, one of the biggest ones out there. We work with large enterprise clients to do everything around social media that they're looking to do. Everything from one-on-one conversations all the way through finding content that's out there and amplifying current conversations about a brand. But my job every day is around the data behind social media. So every channel that's out there, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, all these great channels where brands and marketers can interact with their audience. I'm swimming in that data every day, and I'm looking for trends and insights to make us smarter, to make our customers and partners smarter, and to make the industry smarter, and to understand how people act on social media, what works and what doesn't.
Perfect. So thank you for sharing that first off. Now let's jump right into your book, Trendology, which was just made available actually not that long ago, November 4th, 2014. And Chris, we're going to move quickly, but the whole point of this interview is to really cover the top questions that our listener/reader would like to get answered. And the first one is, what was the inspiration behind writing Trendology?
Yeah, absolutely. So Trendology is all about real-time marketing, this new trend that's happening. But more importantly, it's about how brands are looking at trends and leveraging them on social media. When I talk about real-time marketing, let me give you a quick example first of what I'm talking about. I think the most famous example of this is in the 2013 Super Bowl. The lights went out, and the social media team at Oreo tweeted out "You can still dunk in the dark," quick visual, quick tweet. And the audience absolutely loved it. It exploded retweets, favorites, made headlines. It's still making headlines to this day. That was really the first new version of real-time marketing. It's a brand jumping into a conversation or a trending topic, something that's top of mind for the audience. And it's very different than traditional forms of marketing, where it's very pre-canned content, campaign-based stuff. This is a brand in social media responding to something that's happening in the world and talking about it with their audience. And the inspiration behind me writing the book was that there was a lot of conversation about this about a year ago, people talking about it, making fun of it to a point, because sometimes the real-time marketing that a lot of brands do can be pretty silly and can make for some good headlines. When a brand tries to act human, sometimes it can fail, but other times it just looks different than what we're used to. So there's a lot of conversation about it, which was interesting because I work in social media, but based on my background and what I do, the interesting thing to me was that there was no data about it. No one was looking at the performance. No one asked, does it actually work? And so that's when I started pulling data, and that was the inspiration behind the book. The book looks at over 100 brands, the 100 biggest brands in the world, and how they work on social media, how they use Twitter to connect with their audience, what works and what doesn't, and then jumps into their use of real-time and trending topics.
So we've already brought up a couple of different shares, but I want to ask the question anyway. So what makes your book different from others regarding the same or similar topic?
Yeah, there's a few books around real-time marketing or how brands can be more relevant to their audience, no longer doing the kind of pre-canned stuff that audiences don't really respond to. But this is the first book that looks at the data behind it. And it's about the performance, which to me means it's about the audience and if they want brands to be doing this, if they want companies to be more relevant, more human, more conversational in social media. And the data is telling me that absolutely they do. They respond in huge ways. They share that content more. They reply to that content more. They favorite that content more. And they engage in conversations with brands, which even just a few years ago would have been a crazy notion to think that people on social media would love it when a brand was in their conversation.
Chris, how would you suggest the reader engage with your book? Is this one that they can jump in and jump out as they need information, or did you really design it to be read from front to back?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am a data analyst, but I am also very aware that not lots of people love data and understand data. So the way I tend to write about data, and in this case, social media, is by design very, very user friendly. I approach data very softly to make points, but I don't get too technical. At the same time, in the first couple chapters, I do walk the reader through a logical use case for why this makes sense. Because there's been so much talk about this is silly, or this makes a brand look different or weird, and why are brands doing this? To create my argument based on some data, I need to walk the reader along with me. But really, there's two main parts of the book if you kind of divide it in half. The first half is looking at lots of different types of events, understanding how brands are using Twitter during big events, during small events, everyday topics that pop up and daily trends that pop up. And understanding that, yes, this stuff actually works really, really well, and the audience likes it in all these different scenarios, and lots of case studies, very user-friendly stuff around that. The second half of the book is more around, okay, now that we understand how this works, how, as a small business or a big business, how do I bring this into my framework? How do I build a team? How do I set goals? How do I build a data-driven process? Because real-time marketing, because it is so quick and reactionary in a lot of cases, there's a lot of risk that can come along with it. So how do I use data to manage that risk? And then also lots of interviews with industry leaders, thought leaders about where this whole real-time thing is headed.
So Chris, now that we know the background behind the book, we're to my favorite part of the interview. And this is where I want to take a deep dive, really allow you to give us a great understanding of what your book is all about. Will you take the next 5 to 8 minutes and really take a deep dive with us?
Absolutely, yeah. So I begin with one of the most popular stories out there about real-time marketing and really about social media and brands over the past few years. And that's a story about Arby's and the social media manager in there. His name is Josh Martin. And earlier this year during the Grammys, there was a thing with pop star Pharrell who came out with a crazy looking hat, and it looked just like the Arby's logo. And Josh Martin, the social media manager for Arby's, decided to tweet at Pharrell, "Hey, can we have our hat back?" or something along those lines. And the tweet just went crazy. Pharrell ended up tweeting back at Arby's. It became a whole thing. It was one of the most successful examples of real-time marketing, but there was a lot which looked like something that somebody did off the cuff. But the whole point of this being the intro to the book is that there's actually a lot of planning and process and guardrails and agencies that are involved. To be spontaneous in social media, sometimes it takes a lot of planning. Then I jump in and I talk about real-time marketing and understand here's a history of real-time marketing. Social media is a great place to be more relevant, but relevance has always been part of advertising, and attention has always been a part of advertising, and walk through that. Then I walk through some of the current climate, like we talked about earlier, around real-time marketing. It's easy to make fun of. It's kind of silly. It looks strange. It's been labeled as a fad. And then talk through all the different data that I have pulled. So I pulled data for what's called the Interbrand 100, which is the 100 most valuable brands in the world over the past few years, and everything that they've done on Twitter to understand how they act on Twitter, what works and what doesn't. So first, before I even jump into real time, I look at just social data for those 100 brands. And I haven't seen another book where I've seen other books where people look at what works on Twitter, what works on Facebook, what doesn't. But I've never seen one that looks into here's what works for brands and different verticals. So I think in that case, it's a very unique study there. But again, very user-friendly data analysis, understanding words and phrases, different punctuation that works or doesn't. How does time of day play into the effectiveness of social content? All sorts of different analyses. I figured I had all this data pulled down. Why not have some fun with it? And then I jump over into real time. So I kick off real time with the thing that most people know about as far as or associate with real-time marketing, which is big events like the Super Bowl and the Emmys and the Golden Globes and the Oscars, all these big the World Cup, all these different events where the world's attention is on the event. But brands have war rooms set up so that when a micro moment happens within that event, say when the blackout happens at the Super Bowl, or in last year's Super Bowl when the first play was a safety and nobody could see that coming, these war rooms create quick content around that, something that has to do with their brand or a funny take or an insightful take, whatever it might be. So what I look at is not only how many brands are doing that, but how effective is it? And what's the result of brands doing that? And is it worth it for brands to do that? And what I've found, which shouldn't be a surprise since I kind of kept running with the analysis, is that it absolutely does. It works really, really well. The audience really, really likes it. I then take a turn in the next chapter from the big events to smaller events. And this kind of takes two forms. One is smaller events like holidays that are coming, 4th of July, Mother's Day, whatever it might be, when brands are doing social media around those and being relevant to their audience based on that smaller event. Does the audience respond? And then there's all these quirky little holidays that tons of brands are jumping in on these days. One is called May the 4th, which is Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you type thing. But I saw a ton of brands jump in on that this year and get a great reaction from the audience. There's National Dog Day. There's National Chocolate Day. There's all sorts of different stuff where these brands have a reason to celebrate and have a good conversation. And all these are trending hashtags that are top of mind for their audience on that certain day. But not only do I look at are brands using this type of content to talk to their audience, but how effective is it? Is it getting retweeted more? Is it getting favorited more? Is it creating conversation? And then I also look at this daily trending topics that pop up out of nowhere, and brands jumping on those, and how effective are those? Now, those are things you can't see coming at all, but can still give your brand a big lift in your social engagement numbers. So after I've walked through all the different types of real-time marketing, big events, small events, stuff you can see coming, stuff you can't see coming, I then pivot the book over to understanding how to build out a team and a process around it. So I kick off with saying, here's how to build a data-driven foundation for being more nimble in your organization and using data more in your organization. Here are the processes you have to have in place. Here's the groundwork and the architecture that you need to have in place, which is a very important step that I think a lot of people go right by. In the next chapter, I talk about goals. Social media goals have always been a hot topic around how do you set goals, how do you revise your goals as you're going. And I think real-time goals are really no different. And really the overall finding or guidance that I had around goals is pretty similar to what I've always preached with social media, which is you shouldn't be creating new goals when you're doing real-time or you're doing social media. You have a business, you're running a business, everything you do should be supporting the goals that you already have in place. So if you're looking for more reach, that's great. Social media and real-time marketing can help you do that. If you're looking for more engagement, great. That's the same way. If you're looking for more direct revenue, great. You need to make sure that you understand those goals and then are building your social case around those goals and your tactics around those goals, instead of just having a different silo to say, well, let's just have social be experimental and it'll work over on its own. I think we're way, way past those days. Then in the next chapter, I talk about the process. So real-time marketing, because it is so quick turn, when brands are responding to trends that they didn't even see coming 2 or 3 hours ago, there can be a lot of confusion. There can be a lot of mistakes made if you don't have the right team and process and technology in place. And so I step through all those different ways to make sure that you're managing risk while you're jumping on the opportunity of real time. And that's from everywhere from a giant enterprise global corporation all the way down to a 1 or 2 man shop that can also do real time, but if they have the right process in place. And then in the final chapter, that's when I bring in the thought leaders from across the industry, from agencies, from big brands, from a few different universities who are not only doing real time, but are seeing the future of real time. And really, some of the biggest findings from there were around, well, real time works on social media so well because it's a conversation-based platform. And when a brand is talking about something that's relevant, it makes sense that the audience would respond to that. But relevance can be so much bigger than social media. All these different technologies that are coming out, especially around mobile. If you think about what your mobile phone knows about you on any given day, my phone knows where I live, it knows where I work, it knows the time and date I leave every day, it knows the traffic, it knows the weather, it knows how many kids I have, it knows what I just bought at Amazon, based on all my different receipts coming through mail. The opportunity to be more relevant to our consumers is with every additional data source is just going through the roof. So I think that real-time marketing is so effective because it's being more relevant, but relevance does not stop there. Even with social media and brands, I think it goes way over to offers. I think it goes really far in the next few years, and so do these leaders that I've been talking to. And so that's how I wrap up the book.
So I want to reemphasize something before we dive into the next question. And first off, you did a fantastic job of giving an awesome summary. I know that's somewhat difficult to do. And I've heard from authors that they've never really had to do it before. They can talk about their book, but they never really have to give a breakdown and try and put it in a nutshell. But I just want to re-emphasize something, because at the beginning when you started talking, I was like, oh, this is only really for larger corporations because he keeps talking about teams. But you said towards the end there that really, and does this go for the majority of the content within your book, that it was really designed for the 1-2 man shop up to the corporation?
Yes, absolutely. And again, I want to emphasize that while this is a data-driven book, and the approach that I always take is around performance and data, it's also, it's first and foremost a book for everybody. It doesn't just have to be stat heads or data heads. I try to write in the most user-friendly manner as possible. But yes, absolutely. I've seen real-time marketing work for 1-2 man shops all the way up to these giant corporate behemoths, and even companies that have been doing real time for a long time, and companies that just want to kind of dip their toe in the water and give it a try. This book has been written across all those different spectrums. Excellent.
Okay, very good. So, Chris, I think this next question is somewhat difficult sometimes, and I'm basically asking you to take even what you did for us over that 5 to 8 minutes and break it down even further into it. If the reader could only take away one concept, principle, or action item out of your entire book, everything that you just went through with us, what would you want that to be?
Sure. Yeah. So I think that when you read press or you read different articles about real-time marketing, what you always see, and I understand because it makes a good headline, after every big event, you're going to see an article saying that Oreo won the Super Bowl or that Arby's won the Grammys. They're always looking for a winner. And the way that they portray real-time marketing is that it makes sense for the brand that wins, that has the biggest splash, but that every other brand that's trying to be relevant during that event ends up looking silly and looking a little bit desperate. And because they haven't won, they have in effect lost. And that's kind of the ongoing conversation. And what the book does, or attempts to do, you can tell me if it works or not, but in every analysis, I not only look at the winners, but I look at the distribution of success. I say, of the 10 brands that jumped on this trend, how many beat what they usually see as far as performance goes? And in most cases, it's not 8 or 9 out of the 10 that usually outperform what they usually see for social performance when they create relevant content. So to get back to your question, I think the biggest takeaway that I've seen in all sorts of different forms of this, what we call real-time marketing, is that it's not a winner-take-all, and that the distribution of success is massive, and that it's more rare for you to fail at real-time marketing than it is for you to succeed at it.
Very good. So we talked a little bit beforehand that you might not have a favorite quote from your book, but you have a favorite anecdote. So will you cover that with us now?
Yeah, and I think this is something that applies. This is something from our old leader here before the merger at Spreadfast. His name's Sam Decker, and he's a great leader down here in Austin from the digital side. And he told me a story once that resonated, so I put it in the book. I was talking about real-time marketing when I was telling the anecdote, but I think it makes sense for marketing in general and for personal development and all sorts of different stuff. And it's a story of the peacock and the woodpecker. And so the peacock, when they're walking around, they make a big, they put the feathers out there and make a big splash, big colorful splash that gets everyone's attention, and then puts the feathers back down and walks away, right, until the next time that they do a big splash. On the other side, there's the woodpecker, and the woodpecker you usually don't even see, right? But you just kind of hear in the background, tap, 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 all the time, tap, 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 all the time. And the point of the story, that as Sam was telling it, and then as I related into the book, was around marketing. And specifically real-time marketing, because real-time marketing can get so much attention around these big events. I've had a lot of people come to me and say, yes, it works for big events. Yes, it works for the Super Bowl, but there's not a Super Bowl every day. So why does this even really matter? But the idea is that, sure, you're going to have those Super Bowl moments, those peacock moments where the world's attention is on you. But real-time marketing, as I showed in the book through the analysis, works for everyday topics as well. And you're not going to make as big of a splash as you would for the World Cup because your audience is going to be smaller. There's not as many people watching you or watching topics every day. But if you jump on popular topics that make sense for your brand, you can be that woodpecker coming in constantly to constantly up your engagement. And so that's the idea that I want people to take away from the book. It's that it's not, yes, you should take advantage of these big events when the world's attention is on them, but it works day in, day out, week in, week out, month in and month out, as long as you do it in the right way.
Excellent. So, Chris, this last question, I always talk about it, wouldn't be a podcast about books if we didn't ask you for one of your favorites. And so what I'm looking for here is a book that created a paradigm shift or really had a huge impact on your life. Will you share a book with us?
Yeah. I will. I'll give you two for extra credit. How's that?
Excellent.
So one of them I have to say is The Signal and the Noise by Nate Silver. He's just amazing at what he does as far as disrupting areas where there hasn't been data and bringing data into it. It was really the model for what I did here with real-time marketing, where there was a lot of opinion and no data around the performance of what was happening. I was really inspired by all the stuff that he has done in baseball and in politics and all sorts of different stuff. And so the book has Signal and the Noise, which I'm sure everyone has already heard of, but if you haven't picked it up, please give it a read. It's great from a data perspective, but it's also just a great everyday read as far as kind of how the world works from a data perspective. The second one is probably my favorite book that I've read from a fiction side of things, because I do so much data analysis day in, day out. I like to kind of escape at night as well. It's called Ready Player One. It's by a guy down here in Austin, I believe, named Ernest Cline. And it is, if anyone is a child of the 80s and the pop culture, it's an amazing science fiction book that brings in all sorts of cultural references from there. I believe it's being made into a movie currently, but I highly recommend the read. It just kind of takes you into this different world, and it's so well done, exciting and funny, and really good.
Excellent. We haven't had that one suggested yet, so I always love hearing about new books.
Check it out.
Will do. So, Chris, before we depart, can you recommend the best way for our listeners to not only get more information on you, but also your book, Trendology?
Yeah, absolutely. Trendology is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Walmart and hopefully wherever else you go. There's a website, trendologybook.com, that has a little bit more information, but you can also find information at the different retailers as well. I have a blog, Chris-Kerns, KERNS.com. And you can find me on Twitter at Chris Kerns, ChrisKerns. as well. And if you want any more information about Spreadfast and the awesome stuff that we do here, we're just at spreadfast.com.
Excellent. Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your book with us.
Thanks, Wade. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening in today. If you'd like more information on Chris or his book, Trendology, check out the show notes at the elpodcast.com.
Looking for your next book idea? Head over to the elpodcast.com, where Wade shares his amazing resource, the top 10 business books recommended by over 500 entrepreneurs, with you for free. That's the elpodcast.com. Till the next time, keep it on the EL.